Jeff, keeper of all good knowledge, will explain it to us.
Yeah.
I'm Alan Sells, I'm a Roswell City Council member, and I always like to begin with how I got in politics. This is my second elected office. I told somebody this a second ago. This is my second elected office. My first was senior class president of 1980. So this was not part of my life plan. My wife and I moved to Roswell in 1995. We are Horseshoe Benders, and so this was a thriving area. I mean, there were great restaurant options, lots of shopping, and then we were annexed in 1996 or 98. I can't remember exactly. I think it was 98. We have had a steady decline since then. Now, those two issues are not necessarily correlated, but they certainly track along in time. And so we happily lived in Horseshoe Bend for 28 years. We moved to a townhome in Eller because we have grandbabies in D.C. We wanted to lock and leave, so we moved 1,000 yards, bedroom to bedroom, to Eller, which is right beside Hooligans, if you guys know that area. So we're still East Siders. And, I guess it was 3-4 years ago, when the supertarget became 430 rental units. That's what got us off the couch. And I've been fortunate in my career. My background, I want to set some stages here. I want to give you some reasons for some of the things that I say, some of the things that I think are important, and how I think about these things. Speaking only as a single city council member. Okay, so that's the first thing. I'm here just to tell you why I get involved, what's going on, and try to answer any questions that I can. My background is private equity, so investment, and I have a fair amount of experience in capital formation and economic development and those kinds of things, starting way back at Turner Broadcasting, so I did acquisition and business development. So in 3 or 4 years ago, we were looking at the situation, and I had some things that I could offer to Roswell, because what I saw was a completely disheveled approach to economic development for a city our size. I was really disturbed by that. I mean, what happens in Roswell is we wait to see what shows up at the ComDev window, and that's the first that the city ever knew about economic activity, was it showed up and asked for zoning units, okay? So I had some things that I could offer to that process, and I wanted to. So my choices were, move to the lake or get involved in Roswell, and I decided to run for office and spend the time and effort to do so. But I'm just like you. I mean, 4 years ago, I'm just a regular citizen. Paid attention to some of it. Always voted in the elections, but I mean, honestly, I didn't know that much about it. But I did get involved, and I wanted to. The reason we're here tonight is because some friends, some people in Horseshoe Bend, which is where, I don't see any Horseshoe Benders here except one. Oh, there you're, there's not that many Horseshoe Benders here, but some friends asked me to talk about economic development in East Roswell, and everybody's talking about a stadium, and we will deal specifically with that. But it started that way. It was organic. Maybe it was probably 6 or 7 days ago. The first person to ask about this, and they said, "Can I put it on the Facebook page?" And they did. They put it on the Facebook page for Horseshoe Bend. It's going to be at somebody's house, and it sort of ballooned from there. And I asked Peter Sorckoff and Jeff Leatherman to join me, and I'm going to tell you more about them in just a second. I thought tonight was a perfect night, and the main reason I thought it was a perfect night is because next week, on the same evening, there is going to be another meeting in this room, and it's going to talk about those maps and the whole comprehensive plan that the city is currently going through. I'm the chair of the Comprehensive Plan Steering Committee. I'm the chairman of the Public Finance Authority. So these things that are economic sort of fall into my natural lie for me, right? Those are things I know how to do, and that's sort of what I've been tasked with, and that's the stuff that I know. If you want to talk to me about street paving and stuff like that, I'm probably not your guy. But as far as economic development and how these kinds of things happen, that's my powerhouse, and that's what I'm doing. But the other reason this was perfect was because there's a debate tonight. So I knew there would be no candidate show up. This is not a political event. This is an opportunity for us to talk about East Roswell, where I believe everybody, but Leatherman doesn't live here, Peter lives on the west side as well, but everybody else, we're here because we're interested in East Roswell. And I'm just here to answer your questions. I asked these guys because this is the heartbeat of the economic team. Jeff on staff, Peter as the outside consultant who is leading so many of these things, and me as the council member who reads the contracts and has the comments about those kinds of things. So that's why we're here. So let's see if there's anything else specific I wanted to say before I got started. So I wanted to deal with your issue about why we're here. That's why we're here. So Peter and I, we crossed paths, we crossed time in Turner Broadcasting, but we didn't know each other. The first night I met him, we were talking about the pitch. We were talking about that particular transaction. And we came to find out that he came to Atlanta to be a part of the Thrashers, which was the hockey team that Turner Broadcasting thought. And I asked him, I said, well, do you know who wrote the business plan and who wrote the memo for the board action on the Thrashers? He said, no, I don't. I said, well, you're talking to him. Because that was my involvement. That's what I did, was acquisitions and business development for Turner Broadcasting. And so we had a lot of mutual friends, and he's a brilliant guy and has been such a great addition as you try to change the way economic development works in Roswell. Okay, so that's the focus. That's the important message here. And Jeff, internally, he's the one who is leading the charge on all of the projects and economic opportunities that we have. And this is what I wanted to say specifically as we think about this. And I'm going to get your questions, but I want to set some stage here for just a second. So there's a couple of different ways you can think about investment, about economic development. You can take an investment approach, or you can have a reactionary model. And so what Roswell had always done is, ComDev, which you guys may know, stands for Community Development. That's where people show up and they say, hey, I need a zoning variance for blah, blah, blah. I'm thinking about building XYZ. I have this deal to build XYZ. I need this. They've already done their homework. They've gone through the UDC. So this developer shows up and he's already there, and he's now asking us to opine on that. And so then it moves through a process, and then it comes to committee, and then it comes to council. And for as long as I've lived in Roswell, this was the first moment that anybody knew about anything that was going on in City Hall, that anybody in City Hall knew about an economic opportunity. An investment model starts out here. And so is like my business, when I was in private equity, you get business plans every day. Somebody's asking you to do something every day, and you have scarce resources and you're trying to allocate those. So you're picking among all of these things and trying to find the ones that fit what you want and what fits your investment model or will make the most return for the investors. We're now out here talking to the landowners in advance. We're talking to them about, hey, your property is at its economic useful life. What do you want to do? What's your plan? We're talking to them all the time. And at the same time, we're talking to the business community to try to find opportunities that will fit with specific pieces of real estate. And we'll talk specifically, because it's illustrative, about the MOU that we approved this Monday for what's called City Center, which is the Mims property right there where Holcomb and Highway 9 cross, right where the Chick-fil-A is, that whole property right there. That's a perfect example. We'll talk about that. And so what we've tried to do is to create a process, a funnel, through which these opportunities make their way. So it's an idea, and what Jeff's team does is they try to turn that into what I used to call my TED speech. So whenever a project or an opportunity came to us in Turner Broadcasting, the first thing I did was to sit down and write the TED speech. Ted's house, he lived above my office on the he was on the 15th floor of the South Tower. I was on the 13th floor of the South Tower. Ted gets on the elevator with you. Hey, tell me about the Thrashers. Hey, tell me about CNNSI. Hey, tell me about... I needed to have, hey Ted, here's the reason that we're talking about this. For that 15-second ride up, right? And I did that first before any research or modeling about the project itself. But it was like, does this make sense in the business that we're in? Does this make sense as the city we are to pursue? I want to know that first. So can I say in English words what this is and why this is good? That's sort of step number one. Then from that, then the question is, what does the developer expect this project to become? Right? Or what can it become? What kind of revenue can it create for the city? What kind of lifestyle opportunity is it for the residents around it? So we start to build the model and begin to move to more detail. So the first one is, does this make sense at all? The second one is, so does it start to make sense economically? And then it moves through a process. And in investment, I always say, if the answer is no, you want to get to know as quickly as possible. You want to throw that project out if it makes no sense. That's what we're doing. And so now we're talking about projects way, way, way before they become a ComDev issue. We are looking for opportunities. I'm a board member, so I define my responsibility to you as I'm supposed to go find opportunities and bring them to Roswell to improve the economic livelihood of Roswell. That's really what my role is. And so we're always looking at those, and then we're getting involved in it. So that's sort of the framework with which we think about economic development, and it's quite different than what was done in the past. And I'm happy to take some questions about that, but with that, I'm going to let Jeff and Randolph and Peter just introduce yourself for a moment or two. There was no agenda here. I didn't tell these guys what they were going to do, just said, hey, meet them here. So, Peter, introduce yourself for everybody going on.
Yeah, no, happy to. First of all, thank you for coming, Peter Sorckoff, Roswell resident, Roswell business owner. My offices are actually 5 minutes from City Hall. That was not by design. We've been in business for about 9 years. Outside of the Atlanta Brave, the vast majority of our work has been throughout the rest of the country, and something outside the country. I sort of joke, I think sometimes we're painted as the only client is Roswell. That's very much not the truth. I will tell you, our firm is sometimes difficult for people to understand. They think we're a branding shop or that we're marketers. And while we do some work like that, at the end of the day, what we really are is a strategy shop. So our firm does what we would call enterprise level strategy, which is at the very top of the food chain where you're thinking about strategy over an entire enterprise or an entire company, an entire firm, not marketing strategy or brand strategy. You can get down into those things later. And without getting into all the sort of gritty details of that, which I'm happy to if any of you have questions about it, we're also behavioral scientists. So what that means, and you'll kind of hear some of this in my language, and I'm going to apologize for it because I'm Canadian and we just apologize for everything. But in the Wayback Machine, I grew up as a therapist. Okay, so I worked with drug addicted and alcoholic kids, and I tell you that to say, this is code for pattern matching. Okay, so when you're building strategy, you are looking for patterns, good ones, bad ones, and then when you find them, you try to understand how did that pattern start. And if it's a good pattern, you're trying to make it, move faster or do more of that patterning. If it's a bad pattern, then you're trying to understand where did the bad pattern come from, how do we break it down, make it go away, and then replace a new pattern. Okay? So in the Wayback Machine, when you're working with a person, that's called pathology, right? So, hey, Jeff is a very heavy drinker. That is his pathology. We need to try to understand why
For video,
why does Jeff drink so much and not recognize it as a problem, right? So when you understand forensic listening and forensic observation, because that's what you're trained to do as a therapist, you are really, this is just fancy words for saying you're trying to understand what the pattern is. Organizations have pathologies just like people do, okay? And cities also, because they are just systems of people, have pathologies the way that single individuals do. So when Alan talked about, the city had this really disparate, kind of like splintered, fractured approach to economic development, that's a pattern, believe it or not. It seems irrational, and it doesn't seem like there's a pattern there, but it was actually fairly easy to pick out right away. And then you start looking at the rest of the organization, right, City Hall and the staff, to say, well, how did this become what it's become? Why is it? So you're not there to judge the pattern, you're there to understand the pattern, because you have to understand it before you can change it, okay? And everything that Councilmember Sells is talking about is systems thinking, right? And as we got involved with this city, as an enterprise, there was really very little systems thinking, which meant any kind of really prescriptive approach to economic development. I.e., it was just haphazard, stuff would come in, some people liked it so it got approved, other people didn't like it so it didn't get approved. There was not really any rational reasoning behind why this thing went in and this thing didn't. Sorry, I don't mean to go on too long, but I'm going to bring this back to the east side, because when we started again at the enterprise level, meaning looking at the entire city, what became very, very clear is there are two Roswells. Okay? And some people don't like to hear this, but this is just from my perspective, this is the cold hard reality. And if we can't get to reality, then we can't do anything about it. Okay? So Roswell number one, I would joke and call it the OG. It's the original gangster, right? It's where all the historic assets are, it's where Canton Street is, and frankly, it's where the vast majority of the wealth in this city is, okay? That's not meant to be a knock on the east side, because that doesn't mean there's no wealth on the east side. It just means it is disproportionately located on the west side, because that's original Roswell, right? And so original Roswell, when you think about it as a brand, is what immediately comes to everyone's mind. And so that's why City Hall is over there, that's why the police station's over there. And so it's also disproportionate in that all the power and authority of the city also resides over there. Now that's not hard to explain, because the east side only became Roswell like 26 years ago versus 150 years ago. Important, because when you're talking about economic development, how economic development got done in a city that's 170 years old evolving over time is very different than how economic development got done in unincorporated Fulton County, which is what East Roswell used to be, which, by the way, just means it was a dog's breakfast of haphazard, oh, you want to put apartments there? I don't know, I guess, right? An apartment showed up there. Oh, you want to put a car wash right next to an expensive steakhouse? Sure, why not? Makes perfect sense. We should have that across the street from an old fire station that is now, I don't know, doing whatever happens in that old fire station. So it takes real time to unwind that, okay? And what's very, very difficult about these kind of patterns in a city is people own that stuff. So you don't get to just go in and say, hey, that car wash is going away because that never made sense to go there in the first place. That was a mistake. So magic eraser, car wash goes away. Now we're going to put this in, which always should have been. And that's why working with landowners and working with the capital markets, because all of that stuff costs money, and some of it requires government intervention, because the capital market says this, well, it's not our fault that that's screwed up like that. Right? And if you're going to make us go fix that as the private market, then we're just going to Milton. Or we're just going to go to Alphabet. Or we're just going to go to Woodstock now. Because we don't have those problems in those areas. That is, again, a function of a 171-year-old city, which means we've been around for a long time and everything's been developed and then it's worn out and been redeveloped, worn out again. some of it got redeveloped, so there's a lot of accumulation in those patterns. And then add to that the complexity of this other city, which was not built like that. It was raised by wolves, right? Which anything just kind of went on the east side. And so we have to go back and be able to kind of find systems that basically fix both of those things at the same time, even though they are vastly different creatures with very different histories, very different parents. And I'll end by saying this. We're so concerned about the east side for this reason. Economically, there is nothing, and I'm sorry to say for those of you who live over here, and I know some of you have wonderful homes and you raised your families here, but economically, the capital markets see nothing attractive about East Roswell. Partly because it's a mess, because it was unincorporated Fulton County. It's no one in this room's fault, including Councilmember Sells and Jeff. That is the reality we're dealing with. It is way easier to get capital interested in West Roswell because it has a brand. You can understand some of how it's transformed over time, but East Roswell is very, very difficult to attract capital to. And what that means is that is the perfect case for government intervention. Okay? Because that's when governments have to step in and intervene in the private sector to make something happen, because you need an exemplar project that signals to the rest of the capital market that it's actually safe to come in and do something on the east side, because we have to make something workable here. My plight, and how I tell the same story to folks like you on the west side, is you better actually start paying attention to this if you live on the west side, because guess who's going to pay for a failing east side? It's going to be the west side. So if you think that this is just the east side's issue, you'll figure out on their own. I hate to sort of burst your bubble on that, but inevitably it's going to be the issues on the west who are going to have to actually come in and figure out the east. And then that's where you get friction and resentment and more division and all that kind of stuff. So how you approach economic development from a systems perspective, you have to get high level first and actually understand the realities of the patterns, to then go pick very prescriptively where you can have the biggest impact, because that's going to signal the market that it's safe for them to come in and do things, so it's not government constantly intervening. And I think, whether it's a stadium or some of the other things that have been talked about, and I'm going to go back to my therapy world again for you. Here's your free $10 word for the night. It's cognitive dissonance. Okay? You need the kind of project that snaps people's old perceptions, because it is so big, so bright, so bold, that it literally changes a perspective on a scenario, or in this case, a market. Because it's not going to happen little project at a time, little project at a time, little project at a time. That will work on the west side, right? Because they're in a different financial position than the east side is. But the east side is going to need something that literally changes how people perceive it in a sort of single stroke. That's a lot for an introduction.
Yeah, it is. I hope you guys appreciate we're going to throw it out there. We're going to make as much time for questions. I'll stay as long as anybody wants, but I just want you to understand some of the things that we're thinking about. So I want Jeff to talk a little bit about his role. Sure. And he has been, listen, when you get elected, you sort of show up your first day. It's not like there's a map or, to do this or not. You're just a member of the board. And it's really great to find such competent people in Roswell. It's, my perception of government is, generally speaking, they can't do anything right except make war, and they don't even do that really well. That's the only thing that they're truly competent at as a government. So Jeff is a competent guy, and he has been really a bright spot to work with. I appreciate what he does and how hard he works, and the fact that he's here on his own time to talk to us. He's a Roswell resident, so he's here as a resident, as a member of the economic team, and as a staff member in the City of Roswell. So thank you, Jeff.
You bet. Thank you all for being here. We moved to town about 7 years ago, as Alan said. We lived here in town, continue to live here in town. We've got 4 boys in our community. Actually, our oldest is down at Georgia Southern for his 2nd year. I've got a senior at Roswell High School, I've got a sophomore at Roswell High School, and I've got a 7th grader over at Crabapple Middle School. So we are a family of noise and dirt, as you can imagine. And my garage smells like a locker room. So I started out as the Recreation and Parks Director. Many of you know me from that original role, and about 2 years ago was blessed enough to transition, and I oversee our community development, our economic development team, still our Recreation and Parks team, and now our new Resident and Business Services team. All of those kind of fall under the Community Services brand. So I have a counterpart, Sharon, who does all the infrastructure. So she's got transportation, water quality, stormwater, and the water utility. So kind of all things that impact the community environment tend to fall under my wheelhouse and my role. The slides that you see behind me, and we might flip through them if there's questions, just because it helps give people a visual representation. Peter and I gave this presentation as our quarterly update related to economic development on Monday at Council. So you're welcome to go reference that. It was a long meeting, so it was kind of halfway through the middle of the meeting. This slide deck is also posted. I sent it to the clerk this morning after we gave the presentation, so it's not posted just yet. It will be on the website by tomorrow. You're welcome to watch that. I would say the slide deck is a lot of images, so if you're really looking for the content, you really got to go listen to the meeting, because we spent about 30 minutes just kind of walking through where we are in our economic development process. I would just say that I truly, absolutely love being here in the City of Roswell. We've got a lot of opportunity ahead of us, a lot of challenges ahead of us, but I view my role and my job as how am I building our community for my kids that want to come back here. And that's really the vision that I have for us as, I would say, middle to young families, still kind of in the middle of that transition. And so fingers crossed for me, because my 2nd oldest is in the middle of college applications. And so for those of you that have been through that, it is a stressful time in the house. But happy to answer any questions as we go through the evening, and thanks again for being here. The maps on the side over here, we'll talk a little bit about them. We can point and shoot as we talk about different questions that you may have. Really what I want and hope that you would do is come back to our 2045 Comprehensive Plan meeting that is out here in East Roswell, right in this room next week. We had our steering committee meeting last night, which is a smaller group of people that Councilman Sells chairs. That's where these maps come from. Really what we started to do is looking at different quadrants of the city as part of our economic development strategy, and identifying properties that have an opportunity for redevelopment. And there's a whole scale that you will learn about at the meeting on Tuesday. On these maps, anything in yellow has a higher probability of potential for redevelopment. The green is kind of in the middle, and as you get into the light blue color, that's a least likely scenario. And anything that's hashed out is something that the city owns, or the DDA in one case owns, and so it's essentially public property.
And those colors weren't by us. The consultant who did they tried to explain this yesterday. They probably will next week.
Yeah.
There's a matrix where they said, in terms of what's least likely to most likely, they have some logic to that based on age, revenue production of the space, those kinds of questions, size, because it's really hard to redevelop a 2-acre space, right? It's just very hard, because not much will make the money to make that happen. So that's what the colors come from. Okay?
Who was the consultant that put this together?
So yeah, we have KV Advisors and Kimberly Clark are our 2 consultants on our 2045 comp plan. You can find their background if you go to our website, the 2045 comp plan. You can find all their information in the previous public input, and also the feedback in round 1, which was in August of public input, and we're coming out to round 2. And what's happening is the data is getting more and more specific as we start to gather information. And the comp plan process, I'll just touch on that just for a moment, is really built on the 2030, the 2035, the 2040 comprehensive plans. We do them about every. We have to do them in 10, 15, 20. We have to do them every 5 years based on the state requirements. And we have taken all of the feedback. Many of you in 2000 were here as part of our Vision Roswell. For those of you that participated in our public input process, we've been pulling all of that data together. And that information is really the foundation of the work that we're doing right now, and it's focused on our economic development process. The last 3 iterations of the comprehensive plan have been heavily focused on the residential side of the community.
They were all.
And that's what we're working on now.
All right, so if you're Baptist, you can come here and sit on. We're not going to take up an offering, I promise. But there are some seats. There's a couple here. Phil, you guys are up. There's 2 over there. So come on. You good? All right. So with that, I will put down some questions, and I've just asked that your question be phrased in the form of a question. Yes, ma'am.
All right, I want to know, obviously you're trying to put forth this soccer stadium. Will there be a dedicated exit from 400 so that we don't add more traffic to Holcomb Bridge? Otherwise, I don't see how that works too well.
Okay, fair enough.
Sorry.
So,
Kind of a good news, bad news.
yeah, it is actually, that's right. Vibrancy does make good traffic. Let's just begin with where we are with a stadium and with a soccer team. In March of '24, we signed what's called a letter of intent, an LOI. And the letter of intent says simply that USL and Roswell will seek to find an appropriate place that can be the basis for a stadium-anchored mixed-use development. It is not a binding agreement. It is an opportunity to discuss. It's an invitation to a conversation. We had a press release. We had a press conference. That was pretty well attended. So some of you may have seen that. It does not require us to do anything. And so that has sort of floated along. It's sat there, and we continue to look for an appropriate place that can house this whole thing and make it work for Roswell. There are, probably 4 or 5 possible locations that could work. I don't think I'm violating any trust. We do have an NDA, but we are not in a contract with Kimberly Clark. I want to be really clear about that. There is no contract with Kimberly Clark. To my mind, I think it's probably unlikely that it will go there for a lot of reasons, primarily on their side of the table, not our side of the table. It's Kimberly Clark. So I just want to be really clear. I'm happy to talk about Kimberly Clark specifically as an object, but it's not necessarily, what I'm going to say, it's not correlated to a soccer stadium. I want to be really clear about that. The Georgia DOT is going to spend $4 billion on the 14 miles from Northridge to the Forsyth County line on 400 over the next few years. $4 billion, that's with a B, okay? There is going to be an enormous amount of money spent there. For Roswell, there is going to be a diverging diamond. By the way, this is not Roswell DOT. We like you get to watch some of this happen. Now, we may hear about it a little earlier, or they may ask us a couple questions, and certainly our Roswell will be involved in it. But this isn't an ask. They're telling us what they're going to do, right? They're going to put express lanes all the way to Forsyth County. There's going to be diverging diamond at Holcomb Bridge. So if you look at the 4 corners that were bought on Holcomb and 400, that's because the diverging diamond, they're going to build it and then tear down the old. So that's what that's all about. That's what's going on there. The traffic pattern on Holcomb Bridge is going to change because of that. There's also going to be an exit from those express lanes, and it's not clear to me at this moment if it's going to be south of Holcomb Bridge and feed into the Holcomb Bridge exit, or I'm not quite sure how that's going to work. I think is that the current thinking, Jeff?
That is the current thinking. I didn't pull the reports from GDOT yet to kind of see what their design is, but that's still part of the developer's work that they're doing.
So that's one thing that's going to change our lives. I should say this too. The chief, we're trying to put the school cams around in more of the schools, and so the chief was talking to us and council about the cameras and all this stuff. And I asked him a question. I said, what's the highest speed limit that has been recorded on the traffic cam, the speed cam, in front of Holcomb Middle, right? What's the highest speed? And then, by the way, it's only on during school hours, okay? The answer was 99, because it doesn't go above that, okay? I mean, people fly down Holcomb Ridge Road. It's a state road. We're not even allowed to sweep Holcomb Ridge without permission, just so you know. So we don't have a lot of say over Holcomb Ridge Road. It's a state corridor. But the other thing that's going to change our traffic lives is there's going to be a local-only bridge across 400. It's called the Big Creek Parkway. You've heard that term. And it's going to go from somewhere near the old Alabama split, I would imagine. I don't know that we have this settled yet. And it's going to go across, it's going to go through the Kimberly Clark property. That's why you hear that we are definitely buying some of Kimberly Clark's property by eminent domain or whatever if we have to. But we're going to buy some of the property for that road. It's part of T-Splosh. That's been on the table and it's been in the plans since T-Splosh was passed. So that's so some of this ambiguity and talk about Kimberly Clark probably comes from that. But it's going to go through that passage and cross Holcomb Bridge, 400, and go straight to Warsaw. And it's going to hit Warsaw at essentially Mimosa Elementary School, right? There's a big roundabout, and we've already started phase 1 of that on that side. So we're going to start phase 2. We're going to start on this side as soon as we can, because they say you build the bridge to the road, not the road to the bridge. In other words, we build the roads, they'll build the bridge after the roads, after these completely approved. So that's some of the order of things.
All right, so I have a follow-up question to that, because
Yes, ma'am.
you've actually got me quite confused. So
I have you confused. Mission accomplished.
So, as you're talking about what they're going to be doing there on 400, which is coming first, the chicken or the egg? Is Roswell looking at building a stadium first, or are we, what's the order of events?
There is no deal for a stadium at this moment. So, and just to be clear, Roswell's not looking to build a stadium absent a team, right? So we would not, we have no deal with them at this moment.
Okay.
We have an invitation to negotiate.
Okay.
And we'll talk specifically in a moment about why we think that's a good move for us and why, as a board member, I feel like presenting this opportunity to you as residents is helpful. But there is no deal to do that. So there is no plan at this moment to build a stadium, full stop.
So why is stuff out there on all this political stuff?
You have to ask some of the candidates. I'm not up for re-election, so I can't answer that. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
So what's the time frame that you've heard for the Department of Transportation doing all of this work on 400? I mean, when start, finish, kind of, so we know what to expect?
That's a 2026 start. So in August of this year, this may be a little too much information, but so $4 billion is the largest public works project in the history of the state of Georgia.
Wow,
Okay,
okay.
there's never been a state-level project of this size, including the Port of Savannah, in the history of the state. It's 2 lanes, 2 toll lanes going northbound and 2 toll lanes going southbound. So it's going to get wider. That's why you're seeing some of the property get bought. I think there was
Trees.
that's right. And there was a gas station that got closed down and some things like that in those corners, because the Holcomb Bridge exit, as you understand it right now, will not look anything like that. So the goofy kind of like offset clover leaf thing that's really weird angles, all of that will actually get fixed and be exponentially more efficient from an engineering perspective. It's a 6-year-long project. The good news is Roswell is south, so we won't be in year 6, but I can't tell you that we will be in year 3 or 2 because it's not our project. But what you should also know is this is fairly unique in that the state has engaged in a public-private partnership. And so the state is actually not doing the project. It is a private sector company that the state has partnered with, and they are doing the project. I tell you all of that because it's very important to understand the level of complexity, because now it's not about just going to GDOT. GDOT is like, hey, go talk to, what is it, Peach Partners?
Yeah.
Go talk to Peach Partners. They're the ones responsible for the actual construction, for the engineering. So, you know, these are just really complicated, and that's why I think it's hard just from a general residence perspective, because you get a little piece of news out there, and then I'm just going to be honest with you, because look, I get punished for our work, and I'm okay with it, by the way, because it's what we sign up for, right? When you're bringing change anywhere, there's going to be a certain group of people who think you're the devil. And so that's part of our world. But there are some people who just have an agenda, and they're going to put information out there that is not, it's like reading news versus reading a columnist. Okay? A columnist will sometimes feign that it's news. They won't say it's news. They'll just write as though they want you to think it's news, but it's just their opinion. And unfortunately, in the world we live in today, there's a lot of people who just put stuff out there, and they talk about it with a level of authority that if you read it, you would just think it's news.
To be clear, it's the mayor that put that out.
Sorry?
The mayor put that out.
I'm not, again, I'm just saying at large.
Okay.
Right? So, because that's what makes this stuff confusing. I think that's part of what tonight was about, to actually answer these kind of questions directly, so you know, like, what is actually the case and what is not the case.
But if the mayor is putting this out, then...
What is this we're talking about?
That the mayor announced that we were
we're
going to
gonna get
have.
the pitch whether we want it or not.
Did he say that?
He said that it was going to be bigger than the battery. It's coming.
Yeah.
Did he say that we're going to get it whether we want it or not?
It's all over social media, it's not a new thing.
Hold on, listen. Look, I'm not Kurt, I'm not here to defend Kurt, but I don't think he said we're going to get it whether we need it or not. That is not, I don't think that is an accurate rendition of what anybody has said.
What you read on social.
For one thing, we don't have a contract with them, so he couldn't have said that. So I'm not sure what you mean by that, but
I'd like to see
Can I
that.
ask a quick
I'd like to see what?
It's the contradiction to that. I would like to see that in, writing, that you didn't say that.
He didn't say that we are going to get it whether we want it or not. I'm telling you that's what he said.
we're gonna get it.
He said we're going to get what?
The
A
pitch.
stadium.
We're gonna get
Kimberly
it
Clark.
bigger than the
No,
battery.
that's not what he
He
said.
didn't say Kimberly Clark. He said we were going to get bigger than the battery.
Listen, I think it's very, it is true that people say things from the dais that sound like it's a finished project. But we don't have a contract with the USL at this moment. I would know. And I'm telling you that is not the case. So I'm not sure what people think they may have heard,
We don't think
but
there's a contract. We're concerned about being entailed without our own.
Yes.
I'm here. And so there, we have an agreement to discuss the possibility for a stadium. We have no location for it. We have no developer for it. We're going to have conversations with people to try to put that group together, and then when there's something that has substance, we'll bring it to you. That's the way this works. And that's why I drew what I drew before we got started. And that is, the way things used to work was the first time anybody in City Hall knew about a project, the developer and the landowner had already signed a contract, and that contract was contingent on getting city approval for the variance change that they wanted. Okay, so the deal was struck. And so what we were faced with as a city was we had to say, that doesn't work for us, And I'll never forget, before I ran for office, I sat and I watched this one particular transaction. I won't name the transaction, and I won't name the council member because he's a friend of mine. But they sat there and sort of Pac-Man'd this whole project with little silly stuff so that they could pass it, and knew that that developer could never build that project because we did not have anything to do with that project. We had no knowledge of that project. We had nothing to say about that project till it showed up on the dais and was ready to be voted on. That's the model that was here, and that's what we're trying to change. So we're having these conversations. Are we having conversations with developers? We've talked to at least 8 development groups about what they would envision if we were to build a stadium-anchored mixed-use development. Okay? And we've got plans that have mostly single-family homes and mostly apartments and mostly office and mostly retail and blah blah blah. And so there's these plans out there that we elicited that they bring to us. So we can say what makes sense. But there is no agreement on any of this. We have no contract about this. Anybody who tells you differently is not speaking truth.
What are the
Taking a
criteria
couple
for those
steps back
plans?
to last year, March 2024.
Say that in one more
Well,
time.
taking a couple steps back to the beginning of this idea of building a stadium, a soccer stadium, where you signed an agreement to kind of move forward and start talking about it. Where did that idea come from? What was the genesis of that?
That's a great question.
Was that something that came out internally, or is that part of what the community asked?
No, so we brought that forward as a concept, okay? And this kind of comes back to the east side in particular needs something to jumpstart it economically, okay? So at no point is any of the concept of this a standalone stadium, right? You would be, and maybe this is where the battery thing is coming from, I can't kind of directly answer that question, but I'm very, very familiar with that project, okay? So you can ask me all the questions you want with the parades and the battery and that project. That sits on 66 acres. The ballpark is less than 7 acres of the 66 acres, okay? And effectively, everything else that's on that property is funded privately outside of the actual ballpark itself. Okay. So what you're really trying to do is, this kind of comes back to the government intervention component, where you are jump-starting, let's say, $1 billion worth of private capital coming in to build all of the other stuff because you put a nuclear reactor in the middle of it, which is your stadium. Okay. So that's how those developments work. And I've kind of seen out there like, well, we don't need a standalone stadium. It'll only get used 5 times a year. I'm here to tell you guys, like that is the only place that is true is the NFL, because the NFL plays 8 home games a year, and I think people like latch on to that. I'm going to tell you right now, if you have a USL men's team and a women's team, which is ideally what we would have, you would have 20 home dates for the men, guaranteed, 20 home dates for the women, guaranteed. Probably 10 to 12 friendly matches, which means they're not league matches. They are, I don't know, you're playing the Ugandan team and the from Germany and those kind of things. And then you would probably have between 50 and 70 music nights a year, okay? Because you have to have that much programming happening in that stadium, A, to make it financially viable, and B, to bring the foot traffic in who's going to those events, who then go to the restaurants that are there, and the bars that are there, and all the retail stores that are there. And that's why you put housing in these developments as well. All kinds of housing, townhomes, single-family homes, apartments. You have to have a mix of all of that, because that is the concoction that makes it work financially, right? Why do you have office in these developments? You have office because that's who buys breakfast, coffee, and lunch during the day, and they're not your dinner rush. Your dinner rush actually comes from the people going to a music event, or the soccer game, or whatever festival that you have going on. So the programming of this is as or more important than the actual real estate development in terms of like what you're deciding to put in. Because each of them brings something strategically to the financial mix that makes the whole thing make sense. Does that, I know that's a lot, but is that helpful?
I'm going to add two things to what you just said. The first is the CEO of the soccer league grew up in Horseshoe Bend. So that also was a part of how it came to be that it's in Roswell.
And I'm interested in the east side.
Exactly. His name is Papadakis, and that he grew up. The second thing I'd like to point out, and I just want to tell you this story. I had the head of economic forecasting for Synovus come and speak to the steering committee group for the comprehensive plan last week. And the reason I had him come is because I had heard him speak recently. He was talking, and if you know Synovus' footprint, they're basically a southeast regional powerhouse bank based in Augusta, Georgia. In Columbus, Georgia. And so he's got a really good view of the southeast and what's going on in the southeast. In his presentation, he went through all of these things that work and what's making them work. And there's some slides that are really relevant to us about the aging of Roswell, both the real estate and the people. You know, we are all getting older, and the behind us there are very, very few. So those are some problems that we have to deal with. And so after he got through with all that, he talked about what worked. This is what he said. He was talking about, he said, first of all, you have to have mixed use. Standalone apartments don't work, standalone offices don't work, standalone hotels don't work in a redevelopment environment. It's very, very difficult. Okay, it's very difficult. It takes the interplay and the synergies of those. And he says the ones that work best, this was unsolicited. He said the ones that work best are the sports-anchored mixed-use developments. This was 2 months ago. Okay, this is a good 14 months after we'd signed the MOU with the LOI with the league. He said what they do is they extend the retail day from 10 to 12 hours to 16 to 18 hours. And that's what makes it work. Okay, and you've got people who live there, as Peter says, there's housing there, there's development there, and you've got an environment that has the buzz. Okay, that's whether we get this or not, I want to be clear, that's the only thing that's going to make the east side, the economic value ever pick up. There's nothing else we can do. We only have these little teeny parcels, like Studio Movie Room, which I have fought to make sure that there's not another apartment complex that go on Studio Movie Room. Because that's the only thing that they can do that will pencil and can get the capital to do it. It's what is it, 8, 9 acres? 9 acres? So these little pieces like that, they're really, really hard to energize. And so where we have places of significant size, we need to try to create a catalyst for driving economics all the way down Holcomb Bridge to the river. So that's that. I'm going to go back there to the lawyer. She's asked 2 questions already. I'm going to go back to you.
I mean, is there a market analysis that we can see about this, or have you gotten to that point yet with these concepts?
Yeah, like a feasibility study?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's some preliminary work. Yeah, so there's always a feasibility study that gets done, and then an impact study. Okay, so the difference is a feasibility study is financially does this thing test, right? Like how would it get paid for? Where would funding come from, both publicly and privately, frankly? Okay, because the kind of development you're talking about, sans the stadium, I mean take the cost of the stadium out of it, is likely between $750 million and $1 billion. That's why, like, this is not going to pop up overnight, and you're going to, like, drive to work one day and, like, oh my God, there's a stadium going up and a mixed-use development, because the private sector developer has to go out and secure $750 million to make it happen. I promise you, this will not sneak up on anybody. No. It is not possible to do that with the kind of money we're talking about. So
that isn't exactly what I was asking.
Okay.
A feasibility study, but is there a market analysis?
Yeah. So market from a soccer perspective, market from a retail, housing, yeah, so yeah, all of the above. So the USL comes in as part of their process, okay? And they do what's called a market analysis. And so they start by looking at Atlanta, which is an absolute, it's the #1 hotbed for soccer in America, okay? If you're a soccer fan, you probably know this, but if you're not, Atlanta United, our MLS team downtown, is the 16th highest drawing soccer team in the known universe. Not America. Atlanta United outdraws Liverpool in the English Premier League, who has been around for almost 100 years. Okay? It's also why the U.S. Soccer Federation moved its headquarters to Atlanta and is building a 160-acre soccer facility in down south of the city to be the Olympic training center, because Atlanta and soccer this is the perfect nexus in the country. So the amount of soccer investment coming into Atlanta is off the charts. What we looked at, because the league came in and said, okay, we've got 6.3 million people in Atlanta, you've got a stadium that is downtown, which by the way is X distance and X driving time for people who live in North Fulton. So they look at Sandy Springs, Brookhaven to a certain degree, you look at Milton, Marietta, and you start to actually carve out areas to say, with those people, instead of driving downtown, rather drive somewhere in North Fulton and go support a soccer team there. And the unequivocal answer to that was yes. And I'm going to flip this back to the Braves again, okay, because some people don't. And I'll flip it back to the Braves because they actually exist, okay? So when they chose the location of the Battery, and by the way, the CEO of the Braves is the guy who recruited me to come to America in 1999. So that I'm deeply, deeply entrenched in that project and understand it. We heat mapped every season ticket holder the Braves had, okay? Where they lived, how long they had lived there, how far their drive was to go to Turner Field, and then took how long the anticipated drive was, and then took a map after we had that heat map and looked for available real estate to say if we were building a new Braves stadium somewhere, where could we put it that would be easier for the people who already love the Braves and spend money on the Braves to come to? And that is exactly how that location got selected. The other thing I'll tell you that, just back to the mixed-use district, is this. When we dug into all the data on the Braves, believe it or not, the average Braves fan, drives over 100 miles round trip to go to a game. Okay? So we looked at it and said, well, wait a minute, how many of these people are driving 100 miles and are staying in Atlanta? And that became the impetus for we need to have a hotel next to the stadium, because there's people driving in on Friday night to go to a game on Friday, and then they're staying Saturday, going to Saturday's game, and then they get up on Sunday and they go to the Sunday afternoon matinee game, and then they get in their car and they drive back to Valdosta, they drive back to Columbus, they drive back to Macon, they drive back to Dahlonega, and that's why a hotel went in as a part of that project. That hotel has been so successful, we built a second hotel, the A-Log. The first one was an Omni project, which is a Lowe's hotel. So there's a second hotel that's on site there because the first one is sold out so often that literally there was enough capacity to build a second hotel. I am not pretending that the Braves are going to be the same as the USL. Okay? The Braves are America's team. They're the longest consecutive running baseball team in the history of baseball. But they are a model for us to look at. So when we're talking about market studies, feasibility, we're not like throwing darts at a board and fingers crossed that this thing's going to work out, right? Because the league can't afford for that to happen either. And that's why, there's all this talk about hockey coming back to Atlanta. Look, I'm here to tell you, hockey is not coming back to Atlanta anytime soon. And I have a council member who blows me up and says, Peter, screw your soccer teams.
That is
Let's
not
go get a hockey team here. And I don't want a $200 million stadium, I want a $1 billion hockey rink. And I'm saying that is not the right call for this city.
Right.
Right, that's not, the risk profile of that is not the right call. But the risk profile of a soccer team of this magnitude financially is viable.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so you're talking about the viability of the soccer team.
Yes.
And a proposed stadium of 10 to 15,000 people.
Yes.
But USL attendance numbers across the board, save maybe one or two outliers, are in the few thousands. So how do you reconcile that, or how does the USL reconcile that? And I'm an Atlanta United season ticket holder.
Yeah.
I drive from Roswell to there all the time. I mean, everyone who sits around me is driving from up here. So I don't know if those people who sit around me would, divert from major league, massive soccer to kind of second tier soccer.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. So, two things, because I have seen this argument sort of just cited on social media before, okay? The data that's being cited is USL League One, okay? And League One is typically in USL 4,000 to 5,000 seat stadiums, okay? If you go look at Champions League numbers, which they have 28 Champions League teams, you're more in the neighborhood of 7,500, 8,500 to 10,000, okay?
Maybe.
Again, it depends on the market.
Yeah.
A lot of that has to do with ownership.
Like
and-
knowing how few people go out to Kennesaw to see our second team.
So that is Next Pro.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, and Next Pro is the equivalent of League 2 in the USL.
Right.
Which basically is the cocktail league.
Yeah.
Meaning most of us could go out and play in League 2 right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's the other piece. Here's the other piece.
I mean, those are the guys who are funneling to the first team, though.
Sorry?
Those are the guys who are funneling to the first team, though.
I don't disagree. I'm being
Yeah.
silly about that, right? There's no disrespect to the
Yeah.
guys playing in that league, or the girls, frankly. Although MLS doesn't have a women's program. So what Roswell is on track for, should we decide to move this forward, is actually a Division I men's program, which is the equivalent of a Major League Soccer franchise. Okay, I know that's shocking.
I know, but that hasn't happened yet. They
Right.
haven't proven that yet. That's why it was,
Well, that league
it hasn't launched yet. Yes.
That league will start in 2028 with 12 teams.
Right.
Okay? And what's also, and I'm just to tell you this part because you're clearly a soccer fan.
Yes.
What that's going to do for the United Soccer League that I'm excited about, okay? And I've spent 25 years in pro sports. Okay, so I know that business inside out, backwards, forwards, the good, the bad, the ugly. I've been a part of stadium builds and bad ownership teams and good ones. What that's going to do for the USL, which will be the first time in the history of North America, is promotion relegation.
Right.
So if you are a really well-run Champions League team, you can get promoted to Division I. Or if you're a terrible Champions League team with bad ownership and you are crappy and do wrong by your fans all the time, you can get relegated down into League I.
Right.
Right? That brings a whole different level of energy around how you go and market that. So really, you don't need to sell 15,000 seats a night to be successful. The Braves do not sell 42,500 seats a night. Okay, I'm intimately in touch with their financials. Basically, if they get to 32,000 on any given night, they are on they got it made.
Yeah.
Because in that business, there's the 80-20 rule. Okay, when you're looking at your seating manifest, 20% of your seats are worth 80% of your revenue. That's premium seating. The club seats, all that kind of stuff. If you go down to Mercedes-Benz Dome, who, by the way, they do maybe one of the best jobs that I've ever seen of this in the world in terms of how they built that stadium out. Instead of the 20-80 rule, they're closer to 35-65 rule because they built so much premium down there. Right? And so it's those kind of economics that matter because that's what makes these projects fiscally possible, right? A lot of people will talk about attendance like, well, why don't the Braves have 42,000 people a night? If I told you that 10,000 of the seats of the 42,000 that they sell for $5 a seat, which means financially that's a rounding error on their P&L. Okay, so you feel better about the fact that there was 42,000 people there, but financially in the business, it's a total non sequitur. Okay, so when we're talking about market feasibility and how do you actually go about breaking all this down to understand whether or not a team can be viable, it is not by total attendance. The other thing, and I'll leave you with this, is way too granular, but I cannot help myself, so I'll apologize now. Most times, when the media goes out and shows attendance figures,
It's
Okay?
tickets sold.
They show drop count, not tickets sold. And drop count means somebody who actually showed up and put their bum in a seat. Now, teams will always show you,
Teams will show you.
they'll always show you tickets sold because they don't want to show drop count, but the media will always report drop count instead of tickets sold. I only share that with you so that you know, even though you didn't go to the game, let's say, but you're a season ticket holder, you still paid for the seat, even though it sat empty. So to the business, they're not thrilled that you guys weren't there, but they're okay with it because you still paid for your seat. So that's how you get, it's a very, very long answer. I'm
Well,
terrible
no, that's
with long
okay.
answers,
Well, to
but-
follow up on that, you also said about 45 or 50 music events.
Yes.
And how does that work when we know that Ameris doesn't book nearly that many?
Yeah, so you'll have a whole sort of variety or a spectrum of shows that'll come in, right? Like, I think Ameris does a really good job with, and Chastain Park does this too. They have like 16 or 18 kind of like big shows, and they do them almost like thematics, like, oh, it's our 80s theme, and there's 12 80s artists who are all burnt out, but we're happy to go see them because we still remember them. And then there are the sub-shows that they do, and the private shows that they do that you don't hear as much about. Like a great example of this, State Farm Arena, when we bring Disney on Ice in, most people think like, oh, Disney's here, that's a show. When Disney on Ice is here, how many shows do you think they do?
It's like 20 plus.
Easily, right? Minimum 21, 3 a day for 7 days, but they're usually there for 10, 12, or 14 days if they can swing it. And what's great about Atlanta, and why you see so many shows in Atlanta, is because from a routing perspective, shows will come in because they know the outside areas. People will drive into Atlanta from Birmingham, from all these other places to go see things. And it's a benefit for all of us because we don't have to do that driving and we get to shows. But that's how you get those kind of numbers like that. So the Roxy Theater at the Battery, another great example, right? The Roxy probably does 150 shows a year because an artist will come in and will do 3 nights. They won't come in and do 1 night and then just call it a day. But that's how you build your financial pro forma. Not just for us on the stadium side, but that developer has to build that pro forma so that they know, hey, if I put this retail in, if I build a hotel, like I need to know what's driving the people to come who are going to eat in the bars, drink in the restaurants, et cetera, et cetera.
I call those temporary taxpayers. I ran on doing away with residential property taxes in Roswell. 2/3 of the property taxes in Roswell come from us. That's not the way the other cities are. It should be coming from economically productive real estate, okay? So well, a certain location pays far less in property taxes than you would think. I mean, far less. I was interviewed today, as a matter of fact, by Appen. They were asking me about the GM departure. And I'd already asked to see what the property tax impact is for the GM departure. It's quite small, okay? And when you think about Kimberly Clark is 92 acres. Roswell only has 14% of our total 44 miles, only 14% of our geography is even susceptible for commercial development. We cannot afford to have grossly unproductive gray field strip centers, and that means we pay the taxes, guys. That's what it means, okay? So I'm all about trying to figure out ways to get temporary taxpayers who go home at night, good to see you, bye-bye, or they spend the night in a hotel and they pay those taxes, and then they go away. That's what this is about. We have to create opportunities like that, and that's what we're focused on. So,
and in my world, we call that boundary breaking infrastructure. People will come over a state line, a county line, a city line, enjoy what it is that you have, and then leave.
Hill Street, which I have said from the dais, so I can talk specifically about Hill Street.
That was good.
Hill Street, if you know, we're East Siders. I don't know how many you guys go to downtown or go to Canton Street and that kind of stuff, but I quite frankly didn't a lot. I would go to Alpharetta, or I would go to Johns Creek, or we go to Church at Perimeter, which is in Johns Creek. So, our life is sort of focused that way. Rhonda was on staff over there. Hill Street is beside City Hall, okay? It is on the south side of the property as you go down Highway 9. So it's bordered Atlanta Highway, Hill Street, Oak Street's the backside. It's where the police and fire headquarters was, okay? Two things happened. One, prior mayor and council had approved, bye-bye, thank y'all for coming. They had approved a 1.31 acres. They, 95 apartments on 1.3 acres, okay? They'd approved that. We didn't think that was such a hot idea, because for one thing, it's right on the corner with this property, right on the corner of Highway 9 and Hill Street, okay? It was going to be dense, it was going to be tall, it was going to be unattractive, and it's right at the foot of our jewel, which is Canton Street. So we looked at the situation. Some of this predates me by 2 years, but we moved the police and fire headquarters because you guys approved the bond, as you know, for a new police and fire headquarters. That was part of the bond. It's one of the 3 bonds. We bought, that was $52 million. So it was $52 million for that. We bought the Summit for $8 million, which is closer to us. So it's something like 10 minutes difference on a trafficy day for them to respond to these sites. So Summit, if you know where that is, that's right behind what used to be right beside what used to be Red Lobster. Okay, so it's 4 miles closer and a lot of traffic on a bad day faster, right? So that's where police and fire are. So that freed that corner up, that whole corner up. That entire corner, all those, if you remember, there's a transmission shop, there's a paint shop, there's a sign shop, a sign shop, that's what's there right now. That whole block generated less than $20,000 a year in property taxes, okay? No other retail, none of that kind of stuff, no sales tax, that's all it was. The Hill Street development is going to generate over $1 million a year for the city, okay? On that same footprint. That's our total property taxes go away because we do projects like that. And that's what we're focused on. So just want to give you some sense of that. You had your hand. Yes, sir.
I have a couple of questions specifically for Seer. I went on your website. Y'all have a section specifically about sports. And I see very little about economic development. So what are your qualifications in economic development and analysis? Did you look at any other kind of major project besides these sports stadiums, since that's kind of appears to be your bread and butter?
Yeah, we sure have, and I think what you'll see can be big, right? What we have looked at, because there's really 4 nodes, sort of 5 nodes that we looked at across the city. We believe one of those nodes should basically be a tech center, okay, where we can actually put an innovation hub. And I think Monday night we actually announced an LOI with a new incubator accelerator innovation program that is actually led by veterans for veterans. Okay, it is defense oriented, and it doesn't mean that defense will be the only industry that is innovated in that space. The nice thing about defense is it touches on robotics, aerospace, quantum computing, artificial intelligence and machine learning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So having a tech center like that, which is still multi-purpose, meaning it's got office, it's got some residential, it's got some retail, but the programming anchor is not a stadium. The programming anchor is actually innovation, okay? What's also sort of interesting about that is we really wanted to go out and start recruiting some international firms to come to Roswell. And that's partly because if all we're trying to do is recruit domestic firms, well, we have a lot of other cities and a lot of other states and a lot of other towns that work with us, okay? So going out and finding PBS Aerospace, which I think we've talked about, some of you probably know about them, did a couple things for us. One, it brought us an international company who's building their U.S. headquarters here, well underway already, okay? It also brought us our first flag, or our first sort of like stake in the ground on defense, because they actually designed all motors for cruise missiles, as well as the secondary engines for J-35 Joint Strike Fighters, F-35, sorry. So they are in the DoD system, which means there is a humongous amount of economic runway for how they can grow, okay? So it brings us into aerospace, it brings us into defense, and then it also starts to bring a variety of additional sort of what we would call adjacent or ancillary innovation around that. So things like advanced air mobility. You guys have probably heard we're talking about VTOLs and some of those kind of things, right? There's autonomous vehicles that are being discussed. You have to bring all of that together in these clusters. So that's one outside of the stadium. Whether it's on our website or not, I'm not sure it's there. Honestly, I haven't looked recently. We do a lot of work in aviation. Okay, we work with Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. We work with Cincinnati International Airport. We work with the Modesto Airport. And it's to do exactly the same stuff we're talking here. It's just not a city that's a client. It's an airport. Okay, so Cincinnati International Airport came to us and said, hey, our entire business just got wiped out by COVID. And we are like terrified that if we don't change all of our revenue streams and rethink our infrastructure, then we're in for another death blow if another COVID happens, okay? So what we had to do is go in and do exactly the same thing I'm walking you guys through here. The only difference was the boundary was an airport, and it's very sort of specific to aviation. But airports, if you think about it, run just like cities do. They have their own fire department, they have their own police department, they own land that they have to get developed, they have all these ancillary sort of private sector owners that are a part of it. People are moving in, people are moving out. So that's why we went the aviation route. The other one, which I can't tell you too much about, and it's partly because there's some real estate in play right now that's being negotiated, and there are, what's the right way to characterize it? There are conversations occurring with a few institutions about the possibility of bringing a post-secondary into Roswell. Okay? Why would we want to have a post-secondary institution in Roswell? Well, because we don't make any of our own people. Okay, so economically, if you look at this, like my girls went to Georgia. One of them is becoming a nurse right now in Milledgeville. Okay, and she had to go to Milledgeville to become a nurse. I guess she could have gone to Emory, but there's nowhere for her to go into Roswell. Okay, to actually get her post-secondary education, which makes her totally vulnerable to being recruited to not live in Roswell anymore once she becomes a professional. And in fact, my oldest daughter who went to UGA now lives in Denver. Okay, so she went to UGA, got a master's, double dog, blah, 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 all that kind of great stuff, and then she got poached to go to Denver. Why does that matter economically? It matters economically because when you're trying to bring in outside private sector new headquarters and things like that, they no longer look at land. It used to be in the old days that if you had good land, then that was how the site survey got done. And they were like, oh, we'll put our factory here, we'll put our assembly line here, or whatever. What they look at now is labor. Stop. Doesn't matter if you have the land, they'll figure the land out. You can do modular design and manufacturing now. There's all kinds of technology that allows you to work with bad land. What you cannot work with is a bad labor pool. And I'm sorry to tell you, Roswell has kind of a sucky labor pool, right? And it's not great because we're old, first of all, which means we are professionals who are entrenched and basically, well on our way professionally. And so, those companies need young professionals as well, and we don't make any young professionals in our city. None.
This slide didn't scare us all.
Okay? So that is a critical economic factor when you are trying to build large-scale strategy to say, well, it's great if we can get the capital here, it's great if we have the land, it's great if we have a council who's willing to work together to make stuff happen, but if you don't have people who can do jobs, then the businesses are not coming, okay? And that's probably part of the reason why General Motors left, to be totally honest. We've had that discussion with you. I don't think it's the reason. Right? Because we can get into EVs and autonomous cars and all that stuff that's changed, but a big, big piece of this is labor. So one of those nodes, the stadium is not anchoring it, an innovation hub is not anchoring it, and by the way, with long history of innovation, which I'll take you to, not to belabor this for everybody else, but post-secondary should be another anchor for another district. Because what you want these districts to do is actually connect like a Swiss watch where the gears actually turn each other. Right? So you want some of those kids coming out of your post-secondary, and they're not all going to get a job. Some want to be entrepreneurs. They want to go start up a business because they got a great idea. Okay? And that can happen today because they have access to capital like we've never had before. They have access to markets like we've never had before. So you need to have a mix of these things to have not just a vibrant but a sustainable economy.
I have a follow-up as well. I work for Power and Economic Development Group, and the state offers all these services complimentary.
Which services?
Site analysis, recruitment, research, workforce analysis, all of that complimentary to the state. Why are we spending so much money?
Do you know John Asbell?
I know that.
He's probably your boss's boss, right? He actually sits on Roswell's Economic Development Task Force and has for 2.5 years, every Thursday afternoon, is at City Hall in Roswell for 3 hours with me and 2 city councilors and Steve Stroud from Roswell Lake and about 7 other people who are collectively building this together.
I want to address this question right here because I did not know Peter at Turner Broadcasting, so we are longtime friends. We only met 2 years ago after I was elected, actually.
Can you repeat the question, though? We can't hear.
The question was not a question, it was an accusation, quite frankly. And it was, why are we paying this firm so much? That's the question.
When Georgia Power does it for free.
And when these other people do it
It's
for
not
free.
Georgia Power, it's the state. The state partners with the economic, with the utility service on every single economic project that comes into the state they work on. It is a complimentary service that is provided to Roswell, could be to Roswell, but to all communities, counties, and localities within the state of Florida.
And go back and just talk to John Asbell. And you don't need to hear it from me. Go hear it from
You
somebody.
can hear my name, I'm going to address this. I'm going to address this right now. So I have made my career in M&A and business development. When I left KPMG, I went to Turner Broadcasting. I did acquisitions and business development for 10 years for Turner Broadcasting. Before he came, right? He came in the last year that I was there. Then I went into private equity. I was with Resurgence Capital Partner for 4 years, and then I've been on my own, starting and building businesses ever since, okay? I have been in the business of starting things for 30 years. I have never met a more competent business development thinker than that guy right there, okay? And here's the thing, I want to make a couple points about this, because when I came on, I did a couple of things. One, I wanted to know what he knew, so we had, one conversation that went till 2:30 in the morning. Cigars were involved. It was clear that this guy was a great thinker. His ability to see systems and think holistically about opportunities was astounding. The second thing I wanted to make sure that we were completely transparent in how we pay this man. So you hear that we're paying him $2 million a year. That is not what we passed. What we passed was an authorization, just like we do for all of our contractors, that says here is the top upper limit before you have to come back to City Council. So whether it's a sewer lining company or whatever, they may have a $2 million. How many $2 million contracts do we have?
Well, we approved 3 of them at committee Tuesday.
Okay, so that's a spending limit. What we did, and this is because of the way I have worked in the past, we did what's called a master services agreement, an MSA. That master service agreement set the terms of our relationship, broadly speaking, what people are going to do. And then we do, each and every project is its own statement of work. So they're typically around $100,000. What we tried to do was to break these into small pieces so that he wasn't running away from the guidance of City Council. That's what we did. And if you sit through these economic development and financial reports every quarter, you'll see we go through the statements of work. What the topic is, obviously we can't necessarily say it's this piece of property or that piece of property. And he is being responsible to the economic development team, which is me and the mayor and this guy right here and the chief office COO and the CFO. And we're talking about the projects that he's going to do, and we let those statements of work one at a time. So when people say that we're paying him $2 million a year, that is incorrect. We are paying him projects that are sometimes about $100,000, sometimes a little more, sometimes a little less. And we're saying, this is the project that we're working on. As an investment banker in the background, there are skills that we as a city do not need to have internally, because we're not going to be going through this growth spurt for 20 years. We need to hire people who have the expertise to accomplish this, and then they go on their way. We don't need that level of firepower in this city. God bless him, I love him, he's great. But I don't want Roswell to be having to reinvent itself economically for the next 20 years. I want us to get this behind us and get on with the business of living, just like you do. So I'm very passionate about that, and I hear that all the time, and it's just garbage.
Well,
Just telling you right now.
To be clear, Mr. Ashwell, it's not in my reporting chain. I have right here.
The other thing you may want to consider is when you examine these costs, is the return you get on the investment.
There's that as well.
I mean, this $1 million that they talked about in Hill Street gets repeated. I mean, if Peter was responsible for facilitating that, you have to look at the gross amount of revenue that he's bringing into this city. And absent of that, you're not evaluating the property. I mean, you're evaluating the transaction as compared to something long-term. And I'd ask you to just consider.
Kat, you haven't asked a question, even though this is an East Roswell thing, so.
Even though I am an East Roswell
This
person.
woman's had her hand up.
After I ask everybody else who's asked, you've asked 3 questions already.
Okay,
I'm gonna get some other questions and then I'll come back.
I am an East Roswell person.
Sorry?
I am an East Roswell person.
Are you? Okay.
I am. Martin's Landing. But I didn't get invited to this, so I just found out about it. But my question is, can we go back to the map? The slide with the map?
Which map?
Just of the
Is
city?
it up the nose?
Yeah, no, yeah, there's a map of the whole city.
Yeah, it's not gonna be the whole city.
Yeah, no, that one's fine. That one's fine. Okay, so whether it's going to be at Kimberly Clark or not, I don't
I'm sorry, I'm having a hard time hearing you.
Whether it's going to be at Kimberly Clark or not, it's going to be somewhere on the east side, this big project. Most of East Roswell is, I'm sorry?
If we're lucky, it's not necessarily.
The plan is that it's going to be on the east side. The bulk of the east side is already residential with some pockets of commercial office or whatever, and then we get into the river corridor. You're not going to put a big stadium there. We have Holcomb Bridge. That is the only artery through East Roswell. There's not other, we don't have Alpharetta Highway, we don't have anything else. Everything is off of that. So part of what everybody's big concern is it's going to be a mess for all of us, no matter where it is, whether it's at Kimberly.
You know why we only have one exit, right?
Yeah. I know the story.
Okay.
But we
That
have
was
one
a
road,
decision
whether it's
made
one
by
exit or
Code
not.
Maiden 60 years ago, 50 years ago. Okay, that's the reason our traffic is what it is somebody decided that they only wanted one exit and not anymore, some 60 years ago. And it is, we all live in that reality, okay? It was bad economically. So when you say we're spending too much on this guy, at least we're thinking about these things holistically. Poe just said, I don't want a bunch of Atlanta people getting off of my exit. He wanted 0 exits. He told the state DOT he wanted 0 exits off of 400. They said, you have to take one. So we have one, and that's a state road, Holcomb Bridge, and people do 100 miles an hour down it. So
Okay, but that's my question. My concern is that we have one road. That is everybody here that is on the east side connects to Holcomb Bridge. That's how we get anywhere. And I mean, yes, we need development here and all. I don't know, we don't need 1,000 apartments in one development. Don't tell me I'm making that up. That's from the tax allocation. I went to that presentation.
We can talk about tax allocation.
Yeah, I mean, that, whether that was an actual, I'm not saying that's set in stone, but that's what y'all are going, that's part of the works. Y'all are planning on massive development.
It is.
To make this work. Like you said that
Let's
have
talk
to
about
be a huge project for people to change their opinion about it. It has to be huge. Are we gonna build huge new roads to go along with this?
So you typically would.
Presentation.
So I think, put the KC thing aside, because
That's fine,
I feel like people are talking about that like it's some kind of certainty. I swear to God to you, it is not a certainty.
I think it's because there's so few options for a project of what you're talking about.
That's totally fair, right? And I know the sort of detective internet sleuths start going through like it could only go here and here. And there's some reality to that. But when you do a project like this, or frankly, any of the other ones I talked about, right? The stadium one is just the biggest one. You absolutely have to do traffic studies and you have to model all of that. And by the way, that's not your choice. The ACR actually like forces you to do that even if you don't want to do that. So you have to look at the totality, and I think the lady in the back mentioned feasibility studies, and I rambled on about whatever I didn't get the impact studies, but an impact study is to me equally as valuable or more than a feasibility study, because to your point, you have to look at, okay, well what's this going to do to traffic? But traffic is one thing, what's it going to do to the roads? Okay, well the roads have to be fixed sooner. What's it going to do to police and fire? Well, you have to build.
And then it's done by
That's
population.
But it's a measure of economic activity, okay? So there are.
No, that wasn't what he was talking about. That isn't what he was saying.
Well, it is because that development lives there, which means all the development dollars went to it and everything that's associated with that, because you're literally leaving Roswell to go into another municipality. She's shopping, but she wouldn't be shopping there if that development didn't get built there and that capital didn't get placed there. Right? That's the big picture of what I'm trying to say to you.
Yeah.
Do you
Well, but as far as the sales tax though, I mean, that's,
So
the property tax is going to be higher there because it is a newer and higher class of retail space. But,
right.
but we're going to get sales tax no matter where it is.
Okay, well, speaking for myself, I don't think we should outsource all of our Class A real estate to the other cities around us, and we should just
No, of
continue to
course
see.
not.
Okay, well
We have very
then,
limited
this is
real
just a
estate.
measure. This is a measure
Okay.
of the activity and productivity.
Because I have a question
I'm
about
sorry.
this too. You were talking about,
Well,
I'm sorry.
I'm going to really quickly
I don't wanna-
try to answer another part of what maybe were the other dimensions you were asking for. And maybe I'm off base on what you were asking. The reason I was going to the Avalon thing is this. You're not going to build another Avalon in Roswell. Okay? That's not going to happen. And Avalon is a regional draw. Okay? So you're not going to get an Apple store in Avalon, and then Apple says, oh, we should put one in Roswell less than 15 miles away. Right? So, and I don't know if that's partly where you were going in terms of like what kind of things can we expect in there. It will be chef-driven restaurants. It's going to be a different kind of retail. You're not going to see probably like J. Crew next to Banana Republic, next to American Eagle. You may see some of that, but again, like it's so early to be able to answer any of that because that has a lot to do with who your master developer is and your master developer's relationships for lease-up. Okay? So if Mark Toro comes in as our master developer, well, it might look more like Avalon because he did Avalon. But it also might look more like Colony Square because he did Colony Square, which is radically different than Avalon, right? Or the other one,
Halcyon?
now it's downtown right at the intersection 75, 85. Atlantic Station, right? Which it could look like Atlantic Station in its mix, meaning the lease-up mix, because he did that one too. So every developer kind of has, you know, their own set of relationships. They sort of know what's worked in other developments that they've done. And when you don't have a master developer selected yet, it's really difficult to, in a meaningful way, I think, answer some of what you're asking. But what I can tell you is it definitely will not be another Avalon because you're just not going to have two Avalons within 15 miles of each other.
Well, Avalon doesn't have a stadium either.
Sorry?
Avalon doesn't have a stadium.
No, it doesn't. And by the way, that's what the developers are actually really excited about that we've talked to. Like, you know, the developers we brought in, these are not sort of regional developers. The vast majority of them are big national shops, like top 15 shops in the country that are looking at Roswell and this particular concept. So you have to be able to attract those kind of folks because they also have access to the capital to then come in behind them to actually make it happen. Versus some of the developers that we've seen in Roswell who come in with lots of great ideas and a bunch of pretty pictures, and it gets out to the public, and then you ask questions like, well, why hasn't that been built yet?
Right.
Like it's somehow the city's fault that it hasn't been built, right? When it's actually kind of a haphazard developer who never had a cap table put together or their equity partners in place so that they could get a lender to go build this thing. That's why it's too early to really tell you with any kind of certainty, like who's going to be in there, how much of it will there be. Can we talk broadly about proportions? Yes. Can we talk about what program elements we'd like to see in it? Absolutely. Should you have a view on that? Yes. But, and I'll tell you this is every city we work in. I've got 2 of these projects going on in California right now, and a city council where I did an open workshop on this and got banged away on like exactly what's this going to look like because we want our financing number. And I'm like, you guys, you haven't even picked your site yet. You want certainty on financing. You haven't even decided where you're going to put it. So it's a very linear process in terms of how these things get done. So to come out and say, why haven't you asked me about this, which by the way I get, because you're reading a bunch of stuff out there and then you start trying to fill in blanks, until there's something real to talk about, which may be a site, and then you start getting into these questions about what's going to go on it, you can't actually in a meaningful way get to that until you're also able to talk about what will pencil, right? What is actually financially, like you can find a lender who will do this because you have the right developer who has a pro forma, who has this map where it is actually feasible to move forward. So that's what's hard, right? And I'm going to take you back to where we started with Alan, where previously a lot of the stuff was like, it came to people because it was already baked. So it kind of didn't matter what you said, or whether you liked it or not, it was baked. And they had by right the approval to go do it. So you just got it whether you wanted it or not. We are now trying to turn the clock back, where we're saying, hey, before that kind of stuff happens, let's make sure we have the right developer on the right piece of land who actually has financing, who has the competency of a track record with lenders, and basically sites that we can go to. And why I cite the battery all the time is because it's 9 years old. Believe it or not. It's 9 years old, which means we can go walk it, and we can say, in principle, they thought this was going to work, and it didn't. Okay, and I'll give you a really simple example of this. In the Wayback Machine, if you first went to the Battery, there was a Harley-Davidson flagship store at the Battery. And do you know why it's not there anymore? Because it's financially not feasible. And they could find another lessee who would come in and pay more per square foot to be in the Battery than what Harley-Davidson was willing to do, because they weren't selling motorbikes there, they were selling t-shirts as a flagship store. Okay? So the whole leasing mix at the Battery has changed 3 times in 9 years. And it is largely predicated on services now. There's not a lot of retail at the Battery. It is a Rocky Padel Burn cigar bar. It's a Crew wine bar. It's Super Rica. It is a lot of restaurants. There's, believe it or not, a barbershop, haircutting place where it's probably an exorbitant amount for a haircut, but apparently it does well, right? But those are all services-orientated lease-ups. So having a model like that to go look at means you don't have to like guess on this thing. We don't know exactly how it would work perfectly in Roswell, so I'm not telling you it's like 100% fail-proof, but you at least have something in your market. So we're not like flying to LA to look at something and saying like, well, it seems to work in California, so it will probably work in Georgia. That would scare me, right? You have something in your market to look at, and you'd have to Google flag me on this, but I'm almost positive 2 years ago for the first time, the Battery eclipsed $500 million in annual revenue without a baseball game. Okay? Without a baseball game,
including baseball.
meaning no revenue directly associated to people going to a game, buying food, drinks, parking, $500 million just on the district by itself. If you've been there recently, and the Braves will, probably haphazardly try to lie about this, or at least Derek Schiller, their CEO, will. It was not in the initial plan to have TC Krupp put their U.S. headquarters there in a 50-story building with all their international elevator innovation and technology. It was not originally in the plan to have Papa John's Pizza move their headquarters to Atlanta because they wanted to be on that site. It was not in their initial plan to have Truist build a brand new wealth management office and move a bunch of their people from Charlotte to Atlanta to be on that site, right? But that's what that development has actually done over in Cobb County. And if you haven't gone, I would tell you, go walk it, right? Because you're asking the right questions. And while I can't answer them, maybe as specifically as you're hoping for in this moment, you can at least go see that, touch it, see how it seems to work and feel. Go have lunch there, walk around and eat in one of the restaurants and see who's coming in and how they're shopping, because that is in fact the model on the stadium side that you're hoping to emulate some of the best components of. The beauty of the USL is this, and I'm promising to stop. What the teams in the stadium are going to cost are a fraction of what a new NHL stadium would cost, which is a minimum of $1 billion. What a new ballpark would cost, like the Braves, which I think back then was $776 million, close to $800 million, which now today would be well over $1 billion, right? So you're kind of getting the benefit of that without having the risk profile of laying out those kind of infrastructure dollars on the front end. So when people say like, oh, the USL's BS because it's minor league soccer, I mean, those are kind of soccer snobs saying that. Let's just sort of be clear about that. Because you can just go look at their financials. Don't look at how many people sit in their stadium, right? Because if that team wasn't viable, it would be bankrupt, right? So, who's coming in attendance is only a single metric to those businesses. It's like low-hanging fruit to just try to pick that and say, well, this is why it won't work. And it's exactly the same thing when you're looking at the entirety of a district, right? So I hope that added maybe.
So just a quick follow-on that you can probably answer in a few seconds. I think I may have heard Kat say it, or maybe somebody else. It sounds like every road, no pun intended, is going to lead to what you can do with Holcomb Bridge or other roads you can get into this area. And once again, I'm not assuming Kimberly Clark. I know there's a property behind it that it might be as well. Or it might be down Old Alabama somehow. I mean, that's just across the street. And two developers have tried that one before. So what kind of if all roads are going to lead to, there has to be something done with the roads, what would be the low and high time frame just to address that, to get to the point where a developer say, I think I can get enough cars crammed into this place now in this time period.
So I think someone asked previously, maybe had we had any conversations with GDOT about the 400 work?
Oh, before you go, I'm sorry to interrupt. I've heard people say we need to do a traffic study and all that. I think if you'll go back in history to either Riverwalk, which was what we call Charlie Brown Light, or Charlie Brown itself, I think you'll find there were some pretty substantial traffic studies done in that period of time.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff out there. I mean, you need to refresh that stuff, right? But it's a good baseline to be able to kind of look back and say, well, how much has that traffic changed, or how has it changed over time? So that stuff is definitely not throwaway.
Okay.
When we're talking about projects like this, we have to talk to GDOT about this, and have at the same time. If it went here, what would that do to your project? If it went here, what would that do?
The Dare 400 project is done.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And part of that is, they're a pretty important agency to interact with, one way or the other, good, bad, or indifferent. And not every road in our city is controlled by RDOT, right? So, some of this is also, hey, if we put it over here, would that be exciting to you guys? And if it was exciting to you, could you come fix this thing for us as part of it?
Yeah.
It sounds like they're a long way from solving the traffic part.
Oh, 100%. But
Okay.
that's again, back
You
to the
sort of
single
have to
rail
have a site
issue.
first.
Yeah, the single rail issue, that's not getting fixed, like, in its immediacy. I think all we're trying to do is to make it better, and certainly not make it worse. That's the most important thing, right? So understanding what GDOT is doing and what they believe the cascading effects of the changes they're making are going to do is about taking some of their traffic, they're not studies as much as models, right? Because they have to model all of this out and then look at like, okay, what does that look like when you get to that, super weird intersection of Old Alabama and Holcomb Bridge? It's kind of like it's the goofiest thing in Roswell, I think. And so, we've talked to them like, hey, the stadium's on the east side. Can you guys come in and help us basically fix this? Because it's a major choke point, right? And let's say you were putting a stadium at KC and KC was like, hey, we'll sell you the land for $1 and I don't know. And they made it easy. The problem with KC is there's no de-acceleration lane off of 400 when you make the turn and start coming east, because you immediately have to like jog over 4 lanes to hammer a hard left at the first light to get into their offices, whether there's a stadium there or not. Right? Like that's how broken the traffic system is. So what you're trying to do is how do you use these developments and the other agencies who are going to end up being involved in them because of the gravitas of them to try to like pick some things that you might be able to solve and have impact on.
Listen, I'll stay as long as anybody wants to. It is 8 o'clock, but you want to ask a question.
She's probably
I
forgot.
guess you saved the best for last. Because God knows I was trying to get your attention. I want us to get real about one thing. When you look at where Halcyon is, where Avalon is, where the battery is, their locations are accessible through major interstates. When you look at Roswell, there's only one location that has that. So I think realistically, the only location that you can seriously consider would be somewhere around the Kimberly Clark campus. I don't see the logic behind the other options. It's not like I'm trying to talk you into it. I'm just looking at this from the perspective of an investor. Would I be willing to put it all on the line for a little Holcomb, where TJ's shopping center was on the other east end of Roswell? No. So I just want to be realistic. When you say that you haven't picked a location, I find that hard to swallow, whether Casey wants it or not. I think it's to be realistic. It kind of has to be right there. Whether there's MARTA or not, I would think as a developer, I would demand MARTA be there. For example, although the battery seems to function. I know. I'm very familiar with it, but that's another conversation. Yeah. But I just feel like as all of us live in this area, we're going to be affected. Let's have an honest conversation about what really, from a developer standpoint, could even happen, because it seems to me that's really the only option. And I am curious to know why Kimberly Clark even cares who they sell it to.
Well, let me address this just really quickly. And I hear you, and I hear why it makes sense. It is not the only option.
It is not.
I can unequivocally tell you it is not the only option. And it's not just not the only option for the city.
Well, pretend I'm the developer and explain the other option.
So the developer is looking at a multitude of different inputs, okay, when they're doing some site evaluation. And one of the things is who lives around it, right? And what is basically the household income of the people that they think are going to be the immediate draw, and whatever real estate they're going to build, let's say from a housing perspective, they don't necessarily want to go build the biggest, nicest house on the block. Typically, you want to be the opposite, right? So there are a multitude of factors that a developer takes into this. Transportation and how you get to it is definitely a big one, but so is land, right? Because land price, remember, if we go back to the math on this, and it is just math. Like, remove the subjectivity of apartments and cutting down trees and like all the other, like that stuff is real too, but I'm just saying that its base is math. And so if I have to pay $1 million an acre to buy a site versus $400,000 an acre, and the city will let me do the same amount of stuff, right? Build the same kind of stuff I want to build on this site at $1 million an acre versus this site at $400,000 an acre, they're likely going to choose the $400,000 an
Because
acre.
they get to walk and everybody else, like the citizens, have to.
Sorry, I'm not understanding. What?
I mean, if is this a developer that's going to walk, or are they going to stay and manage and operate?
Oh, they're ideally going to stay operating managed.
Okay.
Yeah.
I should also point out that we included in the LOI that we get to create the owners group from within Roswell. So we're hoping this will be a locally owned team when we do it. That's in the LOI.
But you said national companies were talking to us.
They
You
are.
just said local companies.
That's it. No, that's for the ownership of the soccer team.
Yeah.
This is like, so I'd love to have a locally owned soccer team.
Well, we're talking about the whole.
I get it.
Yeah.
But this is at a different scale than the NHL, for instance, right? I mean, we're talking about a scale that's much closer to Roswell than an NHL project, which is, as he said, it's $1 billion entry fee for the team plus, I don't know what the last one traded at, it's $1 billion plus $1 billion plus for the stadium.
And I'll maybe give you an example of how you structure deals to sort of combat exactly what you're talking about, your concern. So the Hill Roads District, which, we're just closing on Blue City Hall, that Alan mentioned, and if you're not familiar with it, there should be lots of stuff online. So there's a ground lease on that project, okay? And the developer doesn't have a purchase option until year 13. So there is no build it 20 months, stabilize it in 3 years, and then burn and settle. And because that's what a lot of developers do,
So
okay?
we need to know things like that.
Yeah.
It makes us.
Yeah, feel better, right? Like,
Informed.
yeah. And
That's all we're asking for.
well, that's what we're trying to do, tonight, is to be able to actually understand what's on your mind that, is creating heartburn, and then try to do the best we can to address it based on where the deal is today. Now, I'm talking about a deal that's closed or closing, meaning the lender is already in place, the equity partner's there, which, by the way, and this is back to the systems part, okay? So I'm kind of persnickety about how we do this, and developers do not like it, because when that developer came in and said, hey, here's our plan for Hill Roads, and we said no, and the DEA was part of this, and we sat down and said, that's not enough for retail commercial. Okay, so there's 80,000 square feet of retail commercial going in at Hill Roads. And then we said, hey, there needs to be some for sale, not just for rent residential there. Okay, so that's why there's 16 brownstones going in. We put the brownstones on part of the property that basically would create a streetscape on Ellis, because if you walk down Ellis right now, it's kind of like, it's kind of like Sarajevo. Sorry for anybody who kind of works over there. So it's just not, it's not great. Okay? So the idea is we get to create a streetscape on Hill Street, which does not exist right now. We get to create a new streetscape on Ellis, right? And that will hopefully help improve the land value of the other people who live on the other side of Ellis and in proximity to all of this. But most importantly, that got driven in the deal because the city has the superpower of being able to determine what is allowed to go on the property, okay? So Kimberly Clark, I'm just going to use them as an example because we're talking about them tonight, is zoned only for office.
I think the city.
The city,
That's the point. That's the point.
But my point is, a developer can't come in, buy Kimberly Clark, and then just go do whatever they want with it, because they have to come to the city. The city now gets to say, wait a minute, we have a plan. And what you're professing right now is not in our plan, so no. Okay? And then that sale does not happen, it falls apart, because it's a condition to close. Zoning is a condition to close. So all we've tried to do is say, hey, City of Roswell, you guys have these superpowers you have not been using, okay? And these superpowers also allow you to kind of dictate to the developer community, right? Like what gets built and what doesn't. So we need to actually pay attention to this, and we need to be on the front end of this instead of on the back end, which is where we have lived for however long this has gone on.
So one of the things in the fat part of the funnel that I like to talk about, because this is the way, you know, investment shops run. You get tons and tons of opportunities. We're trying to winnow out those who don't have capital. So we vet the capital. Now listen, at the closing table, the bank can always say no. But we want to know, do they have a commitment letter? Do they have binding documents? Where are they in their capital formation? Have they got hard equity already? We're asking those set of questions. That's not been done in Roswell before. I just can't tell you that enough. That's why that dang property on the backside of Rock and Taco sits there like it does for 7 years. Because nobody asked that question. And we're doing that. We're making sure that they can actually deliver. Okay? That's a big change. And we want to get product, we want to bring opportunities to you. Our job as this team is to develop opportunities for you to look at. Develop opportunities for you to look at. Because you live in your neighborhood, and your neighborhood we're trying to protect. But we've got to maximize our commercial space so we can all live in our neighborhoods safely with lower costs and higher property values. That's one of our objectives, is to increase your property values and lower your Roswell property taxes. I'm not about Fulton County, that's a whole other conversation. But as far as Roswell property taxes, we can replace that tax that we're paying. We can replace that with projects like we're talking about.
And to your point on programming, right? Because you're spot on. If your question is on nailing it on that. On like the battery, I'm just going to go back to that example. Whoever the team owner is, the city has to stay involved in a project like that, because if you have conflict between the team owner and whoever's running the development, okay, that creates major jeopardy for the project at large after it's been built, which means the city's investment is in jeopardy. Okay? So that's why public-private partnership and how we're trying to organize these projects means the city stays involved, as opposed to, hey, you put forward your drawings, you showed me your financials, everything seems to be good, we give you good zoning, check, and then you go build something we didn't really want and you run it in a way we definitely don't want. Okay? So all of a sudden the stadium goes up and it's like OnlyFans Stadium Roswell.
Is there a possibility that any public funds would be put into this project?
Yes, of course, yes.
And therefore, if it fails or falls through or something, look at what version on it.
So it will depend on how it's financed, right? But the tax allocation district is going to be a big part of this. And that's why we put a TAD in place. And that was put in place a year ago, okay? And the way a TAD basically works, the simplest way I can explain it to you is you draw a boundary, and then all the parcels that are inside that boundary, the tax level at that year gets frozen, okay? And then you basically take your new projects that you're going to do, and you have to my friend in the back, start kind of building out some performas of like, what do we think's going in, what are the proportions of it, and then what are all the tax forecasts that are going to come from that, and the delta between what you froze it at and what you believe it's going to do is what you can bond against, okay? Which basically means you're not like a general obligation bond. We're not going out and saying, hey, all of Roswell, we'd like to build a new parking deck downtown. It's going to cost X millions of dollars. Is everybody in favor and everybody votes? And then your millage rate goes up because you voted yes. And so the millage has to go up to pay for the 20 million whatever you voted yes for. So a tax allocation district is different in that way.
But we don't get to vote on that if the group, like if Roswell creates a development authority, the development authority issues the bonds, if the bonds are to the development authority, we don't get to vote.
That is correct, but to my friend in the far back on the other side mentioned, if you look at every tax dollar, okay, only 15 cents of a tax dollar is you. The rest of it is the county and the school board. So your TAD is only effective if Fulton County says, we will subscribe to your TAD with our tax dollars. okay? And the school board says, we will subscribe to your TAD with our tax dollars. So yes, 15 cents of every $1 is Roswell, but the other 85 cents of every dollar is the county and the school board. So it doesn't mean that like Roswell wouldn't be on the hook. Do you know what I mean?
We would be.
You would be, and that's why I'm saying, I'm not pretending that that's not the case, but this is where you start getting into the complexity of tax financing and exactly how does that work. And this is where I think you really do have to do what we're doing right now, which is not just have a conversation about it, but you also have to educate people on this, because you're not going to walk away after 2 hours tonight and feel like you got every answer you needed, and now you fully understand this, and you never have to think about it again, right? So the education process is, you've got to really take people through this, because the concern is real, and it should be, but the way that you do this, like it's not something that's been done for the first time ever. Right? And there are negative versions, which by the way, we go look at where these failed to try to understand how is it structured and why did it fail.
Avalon.
And, sorry?
Avalon Phase 1.
Well, phase 1.
Sat there for 7 years.
Mark Toro came in and basically bought, it was called Colony something or other. Before it was Avalon, he named it Avalon. I think he bought it for like $24 million, by the way. Okay, and then turns it into what it is. So that's why, again, these things can't speak up, again, because like the level of complexity we were just talking about, the real estate development is one side. But you know what? It's not worth it. We're not doing it. And then your city, and I hate to use this example, but your city starts to go in and deteriorate commercially. And now you have problems that you're like, why is there so much crime? Why did we have human trafficking happening at a hotel 20 minutes from here, right off of 400 in Roswell? Okay, I'm going to tell you why. Because that hotel was brand new at one time. Okay, at one time, everybody was probably like, you seen the new hotel over off of Holcomb Bridge at 400? And then over time, it started to deteriorate. And the owner of that hotel would not recapitalize it and renovate it. So what they did is, as the basis went down, meaning what they had left to pay on it, they just started accepting less and less per room night until they got to the point where they were like, no one wants to rent a room by the night, so let's just rent them by the month. Okay?
Which is against code, by the way.
And that's how commercial stock deteriorates. Okay? And then that kind of stuff happens. I'm going to give you another example. If you have some of the Class C real estate that I mentioned, it didn't start Class C, okay? But over 40 years, the building has deteriorated, and the only person who will come in and put a business in there is, I don't know, a vape shop, or a laundromat, or a whatever the thing is that you don't like, because that's the only person that will rent that space. And so if you don't go basically intervene with that landowner, then your commercial stock is just going to continue to disintegrate, and then these other things start happening, and you start asking questions like, well, why does the Holcomb Bridge corridor look the way it does? Okay, I'm going to give you another very specific example. Do all of you know Brown & Company? Okay,
This is an amazing tip.
Okay, so Brown & Co. is a what? Okay, that was my test to make sure you really knew who they were. Okay, so Brown & Co. is the biggest Rolex dealer in the Southeast. Okay? Roswell lost its Rolex dealership at Brown & Company. Now they moved it down to Buckhead because the CEO of Rolex flew in and they were driving him up. And as he got off on 400 and got on Holcomb Bridge to drive, and by the way, Brown & Co. told me this story, okay? As they were driving there, he started asking questions like, where am I right now? And there was a dollar store that's across the street from Brown & Co., which some of you may be familiar with, and a Kentucky Fried Chicken, and he basically said, we cannot be selling Rolex watches next to a fried chicken store and a dollar store.
He pulled his brand.
And he pulled his brand, okay? And you know what happened as soon as we lost Rolex? We lost Patek Philippe and we lost Audemars Piguet, who, by the way, if you're a watch person, are exponentially more expensive than a Rolex. right? And so those left our city, you guys. So Brown & Co. has been here for 50 years. They're amazing business owners and amazing residents. But these are the conversations we're having because they're concerned. And they're saying, like, why are dollar stores going in next to us? Like, this is deeply concerning. And they're going in because that landowner owes nothing on that building because he's owned it for 35 or 40 years. He's paid off the mortgage, and it's just mailbox money.
That story almost brings tears to my eyes. I gotta tell you right now, that is the death of the city.
That is what is happening.
Right there. And this is what we're focused on. I ran for office because this stuff bothered me. It bothered me a lot. You know, you guys don't know me, but this is what I've done my entire life. I could have moved to the lake. I chose to stay here because I wanted to invest in Roswell. I ran for office because I wanted to do this. The $1,500 a month or whatever it is I get paid is not why I do this. Okay? I do it because I care, and I'm really focused on trying to change this. This story can't continue, or we have, and also, look, if you look at that demographic, did y'all look at that demographic slide? 75 and above is our highest growing demographic, guys, for the last 20 years. My gosh, we need to change the way we think, okay? Alpharetta's does not look that way. And as he said, their average house price is 2.5 or 3 times ours. So it's not simply that we're not building enough affordable housing. It's that there's nothing going on here. And East Roswell, we should be crazy excited about this issue. Maybe you're not crazy excited about this project, but you should be crazy excited about this issue. And I always ask, when I'm knocking on doors, and I've knocked on 5,000 to 6,000 doors over the last 3 years, when people come at me about this, I say, well, tell me, what is your plan to fix East Roswell? What is your plan to fix East Roswell? How do you change this map? How do you change a story like we just heard? You got to do something different. You have to think about that commercial property differently. We want to protect the neighborhoods, but we've got to do something different in our commercial corridors. That map which was up there, that big brown blob, is the 4 corners of 400. Okay? We got Brixmore and a closed Burger King, what was a reasonable hotel that is now a Fleabag. I mean, you think about what's on those 4 corners. The northwest corner where we put the police and fire headquarters, that quadrant is the highest crime in all of Roswell. I joke with the police chief. I joke with the police chief. I said, you can sit here in your office. His office is on the. You can sit here and you can make arrests from your office. Okay? I mean, literally. So that's the way we're thinking about this. We're trying to change the math. And that's what I'm focused on. I really appreciate all y'all being here. I will stay.
I appreciate it. You said earlier, transparency. I think probably why some of the people are here is because we feel that there has been things going on that we were not aware of. At least that's the way I feel. I mean, so when you said transparency, I appreciate that because I feel that more meetings like this is the first meeting you've had to talk about this because otherwise we've been getting everything from Facebook and HOA.
And yard signs.
And I would like to add to that,
Which is not.
a request.
Yeah.
And the
Please,
mayor literally said
when
this
you have
is
a
coming
mayor out there
at the end of the year.
stating facts like there's
He said it, yes.
and it doesn't sync up with what's really going on, that's why you get some.
Where is he saying?
I'm
On
sorry.
July 29th, that an economic development, he says, we hope, we've been working on this for a long time. And we
People
hope
make
that-
statements about where we are at the moment, and so these facts change. There was a time when a record.
He didn't say whether you like it or not, he just said that.
I would not like to say what.
No, but that's, I mean, that's.
So things change.
But,
Thank you guys. I'll stay as long
No, I mean, that's a fair point.